I can't do this anymore, Liv. I want you out of my life, Blake said suddenly, his voice firm. I stared at him wide-eyed. What the hell are you talking about? He sighed, looking away. We're done. I've got your stuff packed. It felt like a punch to the gut. This was the same man I had known for the last 6 years, and yet he seemed like a stranger. I paused, trying to process his words. So what, Blake? 6 years of marriage just like that? You're going to throw it all away? He met my gaze, his eyes cold. This isn't working, Olivia. I want you gone. Well, if he wanted a fight, I could give him one. But first, let me backtrack a bit. I'm Olivia, a 32-year-old freelance graphic designer. I would introduce myself. It wasn't always easy, but my hard work paid off, getting big clients and cushy gigs. Meanwhile, Blake was a mid-level manager at a tech company. We had our financial struggles at the start, but things leveled out thanks to my career. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I thought we were happy. Then Blake's parents, Harold and Martha, fell on hard times. Blake, ever the dutiful son, asked if they could move in with us. We were just making things work for ourselves. Are you sure about this? I asked him when he first brought it up. Yes, Liv. They're my parents. They need us, he said, sounding so sure. I reluctantly agreed. Anything for him, or so I thought. The day they moved in, the air was thick with tension. Harold, 62, and Martha, 59, showed their gratitude at first. But gratitude is a fleeting thing. Soon, Harold's expressions of thanks were overshadowed by his demanding demeanor. Martha's critiques about everything became a daily affair. Dinner is nice, but could we have expected a bit more seasoning? Martha said with that ever-present, shaky smile. Blake started siding with them more and more. It didn't take long before he was spending most of his time glued to their sides, neglecting me. I focused on my work, trying to drown out the growing tensions at home. But the pressure from Blake kept mounting. He wanted more money, more support, more everything. Can you pick up the tab for the electricity this month, and the water bill is due? He'd say, almost as if it was a given. Blake, I can't keep covering everything, I protested, but it was like talking to a wall. I felt like a stranger in my own house. The Blake I knew was slipping away, and a different person was taking his place. The tension clung to the air, thick and unyielding, suffocating any semblance of normalcy. I didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would have me fighting for my sanity and dignity. As I stood in our living room, Blake's cold words echoing in my head, I realized this was it. This was the moment everything started to unravel. Fine, I said, my voice steady. If this is how you want it, Blake, then so be it. His eyes flickered with surprise, but he quickly masked it. Yeah, that's how I want it. With that, I turned on my heel, heading towards our bedroom to pack my things. I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. This was just the beginning of a battle for my life, my freedom. A battle I was determined to win. When Blake's parents moved in, the change was immediate. The house felt tighter, the air tenser. Our first dinner together set the tone for what was to come. I had prepared a simple meal, but the quiet was deafening until Harold broke it. This is it, Harold muttered under his breath, poking at his food with noticeable disdain. I forced a smile. Is everything okay, Harold? Do you need anything else? He barely looked up. It's fine, Olivia. Just different from what we're used to. Blake, sitting next to his father, spoke up. Liv's just trying to make everyone happy. Give her a break. Martha looked at Blake, her expression unreadable, and then turned to me. Maybe next time you could let me help in the kitchen. I know how to make things a bit more flavorful. That was the beginning of it. The polite facade slipped quickly. Harold and Martha weren't just houseguests. They were critics, constantly finding fault in everything I did. Blake, who once had my back, stopped defending me as often. I found Blake in the living room one evening, talking to his mother. She really needs to step up, Martha was saying. This isn't just her house. It's everyone's now. Blake nodded, looking exhausted. I'm trying, Mom. But you know Liv. Hearing this from the hallway, I clenched my fists. These subtle jabs felt like needles piercing my skin, constant and relentless. That night, as we lay in bed, I brought it up. Blake, your parents are becoming a problem. This isn't what I signed up for. He sighed and turned over to face me. They're just having a hard time, Liv. Cut them some slack. And can you help out more with the bills? We're all in this together. Help out more? I could barely keep the frustration from my voice. I'm already covering more than half. How much more do you expect me to do? I thought back to why I agreed to this in the first place. I loved Blake. I wanted to help his family, but it was becoming an unsustainable burden. Days turned into weeks. Harold and Martha weren't shy about being demanding. They didn't just criticize anymore, they expected complete servitude. Olivia, can you take care of this? Olivia, can you do that? Martha's requests were endless, and her criticisms were biting. One on particularly frustrating day, she asked, "What exactly is it that you do for work, dear? It seems like you're always on that computer, but is it really work?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, Martha. Graphic design is my job. It pays the bills." "Well, it's not real work," she said dismissively. "Try managing a family, then you'll know what real work is." There was no winning with her. And Blake growing distant wasn't helping either. He came home later, avoided conversations, spent more time with his parents. One evening, I caught him glancing at his phone, the screen lighting up briefly. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep it casual. "No one important," he replied, but his tone was off. It was becoming clear that something more was happening. In those moments, a fire started burning within me. I knew I couldn't keep this up. Something had to change, and if Blake wasn't going to step up for our marriage, I would have to take matters into my own hands. Dinner after dinner, day after day, their presence became more unbearable. My patience was thin. Every criticism, every demand was pushing me closer to the edge. If Blake and his parents thought they could walk all over me, they were in for a rude awakening. This was our home, but they had turned it into a battleground, and I was gearing up to fight back, one way or another. One evening, I overheard voices coming from the living room. I stopped in the hallway, straining to hear. Harold's voice was unmistakable. "She's a goldmine, Blake. You should make sure we're all set for a while," Harold said, sounding smug. "I know, Dad," Blake replied, his tone low. "Good, just keep her earning. We'll be comfortable for years," Harold continued. I felt rage rising. They were talking about living off my hard work. I needed evidence, something concrete. I quietly pulled out my phone and recorded their conversation from the hallway, capturing their vile plans. The next morning, Martha found me working in the kitchen. "Still on that computer, dear," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Yes, Martha. This is my job," I replied, trying to stay calm. She rolled her eyes. "It's not real work. Try managing a household, then you'd understand what hard work really is." I wasn't going to let her get to me, not today. "Well, someone's got to pay the bills around here," I said, adding a cutting edge to my voice. Blake's behavior was also getting strange. He wasn't just neglecting me, he was spending money lavishly, buying things we didn't need, new gadgets, expensive clothes, things that didn't add up given our financial situation. One night, I saw Blake getting ready to leave. "Where are you going?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Just a work thing." "Don't wait up," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Work thing?" I narrowed my eyes, but he brushed me off, already halfway out the door. Suspicion gnawed at me. I decided to follow him. Keeping a safe distance, I trailed his car down to a fancy restaurant. My heart dropped when I saw Blake stepping out, holding the hand of a much younger woman. I parked a bit away and watched, my stomach twisting as they walked inside and took a cozy, intimate booth. Pulling out my phone, I discreetly took photos, each flashless snapshot capturing a piece of my crumbling world. Later, they exited, and then it happened. He kissed her right there in the parking lot. I felt like screaming but held it in, capturing the damning evidence instead. It became crystal clear. Blake was cheating on me. I went home, replaying the day's events in my mind. Blake's family's leeching, Martha's incessant criticism, and now this, Blake's betrayal. I knew then that things had to change. I would not be their doormat anymore. The next morning, Martha started her usual tirade. "Olivia, can you clean up the guest room today?" "No, Martha. I'm busy," I said bluntly, not looking up from my laptop. "Well, excuse me, Mrs. Big Shot, too busy for household chores," she said, seething. I looked up, cool and composed. "I'm running a business, Martha. Maybe if Blake contributed more, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Blake entered the room, sensing the tension. "What's going on?" "Nothing," I said, packing my things for a work meeting. "Just a reminder of who's actually keeping this house running." His eyes flickered with annoyance, but he said nothing. My resolve hardened. I would gather everything I needed and form a plan. Blake, Harold, Martha. They all underestimated me. But I wouldn't be underestimated for long. This was just the beginning, and they had no idea what was coming for them. The betrayal was a bitter pill to swallow. I decided enough was enough. It was time to form an escape plan, and Blake would never see it coming. The first step was hiring a private investigator. I met with Mr. Davis, a seasoned investigator who had seen it all. Sitting across from him in his modest office, I laid out my situation. "I need proof, Mr. Davis. Proof of my husband's affair and anything else he might be hiding," I said, my voice firm. He nodded, jotting down notes. "Leave it to me. We'll start digging." With the PI on the case, I began tightening the reins on my finances. I stopped contributing to the household bills, letting Blake feel the strain. He noticed quickly. "What happened to all the money? Are you hiding it from us?" He demanded one evening, his face twisted with frustration. I looked at him with a steely gaze. "Maybe you should ask your girlfriend about financial transparency," I replied, my voice cold as ice. Blake's eyes widened, shock and fear flickering across his face. He tried to recover, but he knew I had caught him. "What are you talking about?" "I've seen you, Blake. At the restaurant with her," I said, each word hitting him like a hammer. "Don't pretend anymore." The color drained from his face. "Liv, it's not what you think." "Oh, it's exactly what I think," I said, my resolve hardening. From that moment, the atmosphere in the house became even more tense. Blake tried to downplay it, but the damage was done. Meanwhile, I focused on gathering my own evidence and taking back control of my life. A few days later, Mr. Davis contacted me with a file of findings. He had photos, phone records, everything I needed. I was ready to confront Blake and his family. One evening, as Blake and his parents sat in the living room, I walked in, holding the envelope of evidence. "We need to talk," I announced. Harold glanced up, annoyed. "What now, Olivia?" Ignoring his tone, I focused on Blake. "This ends now. I have proof of your affair and your parents' plan to live off my earnings. You've all been caught." Martha tried to interject. "What nonsense are you talking about?" I threw the envelope on the coffee table. The pictures and documents spilled out in front of them. "See for yourselves," I said. Blake hesitated before picking up the photos. His face went pale as he looked through them. Harold and Martha leaned over, their expressions turning from curiosity to shock. This is ridiculous," stammered Harold, trying to regain control. "You have no right." "I have every right," I snapped. "You've abused my trust, taken advantage of my hard work, and tried to deceive me. No more." Blake looked desperate. "Liv, let's talk about this. We can fix it." "There's nothing to fix," I said, turning away from him. "I'm filing for separation. I'm done with all of you." Leaving them stunned and speechless, I went to pack my bags. The feeling of liberation was empowering as I packed up my essential belongings. Blake and his parents watched silently, the weight of their actions finally sinking in. As I walked out of the house, I felt a surge of relief. This was the beginning of my new life, a life where I would no longer be manipulated or betrayed. And no matter what came next, I was ready to face it on my own terms. Filing for separation was easier than expected. Blake didn't put up much of a fight. He knew the evidence I had against him was irrefutable. The papers were served, and I prepared to leave our shared home for good. On the day I planned to move out, I walked into a scene straight out of a bad drama. Blake, Harold, and Martha sat in the living room, their expressions dark and resolute. Blake stood up as soon as he saw me. "Sit down, Olivia. We need to talk," he commanded, a hint of desperation in his voice. "No, we don't," I replied, continuing to pack my things. Harold's voice boomed. "Enough of this nonsense. You're going to sign this." He shoved a document in my face. I glanced at it. It was a legal form transferring all my earnings and assets to Blake. I looked at Harold incredulously. "You've got to be kidding me." "Sign it, Olivia," Martha chimed in. "It's for the good of the family." "Family?" I shot back, fury rising. "You mean the family that's been using me? The family that has lied and cheated and manipulated me?" Blake looked at me, his facade crumbling. "We're struggling, Liv. We need your help," I laughed bitterly. "Your help? Help you and your parents continue to freeload off me while you carry on with your affair?" Blake paled. "That's over, Liv, I swear. Just sign the document and we can move forward." I glared at him, feeling the weight of every betrayal. "Move forward? With you? No chance." With a shaking hand, I reached into my bag and pulled out the damning photos. I threw them across the table, watching as their faces twisted in anger and shock. "What is this?" Martha demanded, picking up a photo of Blake and his mistress. "That, Martha, is evidence," I said coldly. "Evidence that Blake has been lying to me, cheating on me, and now you want me to sign away everything I've worked for?" Harold's face darkened. "You ungrateful," I cut him off. "Enough. I'm leaving, and I'm taking what's mine with me." As I turned to leave, Blake lunged for my arm. "Wait, Liv. Please, let's talk about this." I yanked my arm free. "There's nothing left to talk about." With my bags packed and dignity intact, I stepped out, leaving them behind. The sense of liberation was palpable. I drove to my new apartment, a small but modern place I had rented. It was starkly different from the house I shared with Blake, but it was mine, and that's all that mattered. A few days later, as I was settling in, Mr. Davis called me. "Olivia, there's something you need to hear." "What is it?" I asked, hoping it wasn't more bad news. "It's about Harold. I've dug up some information on his past financial dealings. It's bad, Olivia. Real bad." "Tell me everything," I said, bracing myself. As Mr. Davis outlined Harold's history of fraud and deception, a plan began to take shape in my mind. Blake and his parents had tried to ruin me, but now I had the upper hand. It was time to take things to the next level. Hanging up the phone, I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. And I was ready to fight for it, no matter the cost. Moving into my new apartment was a breath of fresh air. Away from Blake and his toxic family, I finally felt like I could breathe. I poured myself into work, cutting off all financial ties with Blake. Without my support, it wasn't long before the pressure hit him and his parents hard. One morning, I received a frantic call from Blake. "Olivia, can we talk?" I laughed, the irony not lost on me. "What's there to talk about, Blake? We're done." "But the bills, the mortgage, we're drowning here." "Welcome to my world," I replied coldly before hanging up. That same afternoon, I got a call from Mr. Davis. "Olivia, I've found more on Harold. You might want to sit down for this." I leaned back, bracing myself. "Go ahead." Mr. Davis spoke calmly, but with a sense of urgency. "Harold has a history of defrauding others. I've compiled enough evidence that, if made public, could land him in serious trouble." A plan began forming in my mind. "Can you get me everything you have on him?" "Already on it," Mr. Davis assured. "You'll have it by tomorrow." The next day, a thick file arrived at my doorstep. Reading through it, I realized the gravity of Harold's actions. He wasn't just manipulative, he was a criminal. I knew what I had to do next. A week later, I made an anonymous call to a local journalist. "I have a tip on a significant financial crime," I started, my voice steady. "I have all the evidence you need." "What's the story?" the journalist asked, her interest piqued. "Harold Andrews, A History of Fraud. I'll send you the documents. You'll see for yourself." Within days, the news broke. Harold's past crimes were plastered all over local media. Blake's phone calls became more frequent, each one more desperate than the last. I ignored them all. Soon enough, I heard through a mutual friend that Blake was demoted at work due to the scandal. The glitzy facade of his life crumbled, leaving him exposed and humiliated. One evening, I received a call from Martha. Her voice was raw with anger and desperation. "How could you do this to us, Olivia?" "Do what?" I asked, feigning innocence. "You know damn well what," she screeched. "You've ruined us. Harold's reputation, Blake's job, everything." I savored the moment. "You ruined yourselves by underestimating me and taking advantage of me. This is on you." She hung up, but the victory felt hollow. Facing betrayal from the people you once called family leaves scars. Later that night, Blake showed up unannounced at my apartment. He looked defeated, tired shadows under his eyes. "Liv, please, I'm begging you. Can we just talk?" I let him in, but my guard was up. "What do you want, Blake?" He slumped on the couch, looking around my new place as if seeing the stark difference between this and our old house. "I messed up, Liv. I know that. But can we start over?" I shook my head, almost pitying him. "There's no starting over, Blake. You made your choices. Live with them." "But what about us?" he pleaded. I stood firm, crossing my arms. "There is no us. There never will be again. Goodbye, Blake." Seeing he was getting nowhere, Blake left, head hanging low. The door clicked shut behind him, and with it, I felt the final severance from my past life. The road ahead was mine alone to walk. and I intended to walk it with my head held high. The fallout from the scandal was swift and brutal. Harold's face was plastered across every news outlet, his history of fraud laid bare for everyone to see. Blake's demotion followed soon after. The tech company wanted nothing to do with scandal-tainted employees. The pressure cooker that was Blake's home life finally exploded. I heard through mutual friends that Harold and Martha were tearing into Blake like never before. Their golden son, who was supposed to save them, had instead plunged them into ruin. One day Martha showed up at my door, her eyes blazing with fury. "Do you know what you've done?" she spat. I met her gaze, unflinching. "I did what I had to, Martha. You brought this on yourselves. How dare you?" she screamed, her voice shrill. "We trusted you, and you betrayed us." "Trusted me?" I shot back, incredulous. "You mean used me. Blake's affair, your freeloading, Harold's crimes, trust had nothing to do with it." She took a step closer, her jaw set in anger. "You can't win, Olivia. We'll bounce back. You don't get it, do you?" I said, shaking my head. "This isn't about winning. This is about getting free of your toxic grip. Go home, Martha. Face the consequences of your actions." She stormed off, but I knew this wasn't the end. Blake tried to win back my sympathy next, showing up at my apartment days later, looking more pathetic than ever. "Olivia, please. I need your help," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why should I help you, Blake?" I asked, genuinely curious. "We're losing everything. The house, the savings. I don't know what to do," he said, tears welling up in his eyes. I leaned back, arms crossed. "What happened to all those high-paying tech jobs, Blake? Where's your girlfriend in all this?" "She left," he confessed, eyes downcast. "Not surprising," I said with a faint smirk. "But that's not my problem anymore. You made your bed, Blake." His face twisted in pain. "How can you be so cold, Liv? We were a family once." "No, Blake, we weren't a family. Families don't lie and cheat and use each other. Now get out. I'm done." He left, shoulders slumped in defeat. The realization that he'd lost everything finally sinking in. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my life. Work was flourishing. Clients appreciated my dedication and creativity. I reinvested my earnings wisely, buying a cozy lakeside house. It was a fresh start, a beautiful escape from my turbulent past. A few weeks later, I received an email from an old friend who'd seen the news. "Heard about what you did. Let's catch up soon," it read. It felt good, reconnecting with people who hadn't been part of the toxic mess my life had become. One day, at a coffee shop where I often went to clear my head, a young woman approached me. "Excuse me, are you Olivia?" she asked nervously. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" "I'm a graphic design student," she explained, her voice trembling. "I've been following your work. It's really inspiring." "Thank you," I said, smiling warmly. "What's your name?" "Emily," she replied. We chatted for a while, and I could see a spark in her eyes, a passion for design that reminded me of myself years ago. Before she left, I gave her my business card. "Stay in touch, Emily. I'd love to help you find your way in the industry." As I watched her leave, I felt a sense of fulfillment. I had managed to break free from my past and was now in a position to guide others. The journey had been painful, but it led me to a place of strength and clarity. No longer shackled by betrayal, I was free to chart my own course, confident in my self-worth and the lessons learned. Life by the lakeside was peaceful. Every morning I would sit on the porch with my coffee, the serene water reflecting the calm I now felt within. My graphic design business was thriving, and I reinvested my earnings wisely. It was empowering to be financially free and stable. One evening, as I was winding down, my phone rang. It was Emily, the young graphic designer I had met weeks earlier. "Olivia, do you have a moment?" she asked nervously. "Of course, Emily. What's on your mind?" "I got an offer to work with a major design firm, but I'm not sure if I should take it. What if they want to take advantage of me, like your story?" Her concern was genuine, and I understood her fear. "Emily, listen to me. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. But also remember, not everyone is out to get you. Keep your eyes open and stay true to your values." "Thanks, Olivia. I just needed to hear that from someone who's been through it." "You've got this, Emily. Keep me posted, okay?" Hanging up, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Helping Emily reminded me of how far I'd come. I had turned my pain into a tool for supporting others. A few days later, while grocery shopping, I ran into an old acquaintance who had known both Blake and me. Sarah looked surprised to see me. Olivia, I heard about everything. How are you holding up? I'm doing well, Sarah. Better than ever, actually. Blake and his parents are in shambles. Their house is being repossessed, and they're facing legal troubles because of Harold. I heard, I said calmly. Poetic justice, I suppose. Poetic indeed, she agreed, giving me a knowing smile. Well, it's good to see you thriving. Olivia, you deserve it. As I left the store, I reflected on Sarah's words. Thriving was exactly what I was doing. Every step away from Blake was a step toward reclaiming my life. One evening, while I was enjoying the sunset by the lake, I received a call from my lawyer. Olivia, everything is finalized. You've successfully severed all financial and legal ties with Blake. Thank you, Linda. That's a huge relief. You're officially free, Olivia. Enjoy it. I intend to, I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. With that chapter officially closed, I threw myself into my work and hobbies. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years, finding solace in the colors and brushstrokes. One weekend, a few old friends came over for a small get-together. As we laughed and reminisced, I felt a strong sense of belonging that had been missing for so long. By the end of the night, my closest friend, Jessica, pulled me aside. Olivia, I'm so proud of you. You've come so far. Thanks, Jess. It wasn't easy, but I had to do it for my sanity. You did, and look at you now. You're glowing. Her words meant everything. They validated my journey toward self-worth and healing. As the weeks passed, I continued mentoring Emily, helping her navigate the tricky world of freelance design. Each time we spoke, I saw a more confident, empowered version of her emerge. It was rewarding, knowing I was making a difference. One day, as I sat by the lake, watching the ripples dance across the water, I realized something profound. I had no regrets. Every painful step had led me to this place of peace and purpose. I picked up my sketchbook and began to draw, capturing the beauty of the moment, content with the knowledge that I had built a life worth living. Free from the chains of betrayal and manipulation, I had found my true self, and that was the greatest victory of all. The door slammed shut behind me, echoing through the empty hallway. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. Ethan's shoes were not the ones greeting me, but a pair I knew all too well. Vera's. Alara, what in the world do you think you're doing, coming home this late? Vera's voice sliced through the silence, sharp and accusing. I found my voice, though it trembled slightly. Vera, I didn't expect you to be here. It's not about me being here. It's about you neglecting your duties as a wife. Where have you been? Her eyes bore into me, seeking to unravel any excuse I might offer. I clutched the book about Miami tighter, feeling the weight of her judgment. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about every silent battle, every unspoken grievance that had built up over months. Ethan told me he wants a divorce, she continued, her words cutting deeper. I can't say I blame him. You're hardly the wife we hoped for. I felt a cold resolve settle over me. This was not just a confrontation. It was a declaration of war. My marriage, my life, was slipping through my fingers, controlled by a woman who saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. I had always been the quiet one, the one who avoided conflict. But as Vera's words echoed in my mind, something within me snapped. No more. I wouldn't be the silent, suffering wife anymore. Vera, I work too, you know. I'm not just a housewife waiting for Ethan to come home, I said, my voice steady now. You work? That little office job? You think that's an excuse? You should be here, making this a home, not gallivanting around, she scoffed, her disdain palpable. Her words stung, but I stood my ground. I have every right to live my life, Vera. I'm not just an extension of Ethan. Her lips curled into a sneer. You're a disappointment, Alara. A real wife would put her husband and his family first. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. I won this trip to Miami, Vera. I was planning to give it to my parents, but now... Her eyes lit up with a mix of surprise and greed. Miami? Well, that changes things. Ethan and I could use a holiday. The audacity of her words hit me like a physical blow. It's not yours to take, Vera. I won it. It was for my parents. She stepped closer, her voice dripping with venom. You're part of this family now, Alara. Your things are our things. And if Ethan wants to go to Miami with his mother, who are you to stop him? I felt the anger rising in me, a burning flame fueled by months of her belittling and manipulation. It's my prize, Vera. I decide what happens to it. Her laugh was cold and mocking. We'll see about that, Alara. We'll see. She turned on her heel and left, leaving me standing alone, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and anger. I knew then that this was just the beginning. I had to fight back, not just for myself, but for the life I wanted, a life free from Vera's shadow. As I lay in bed that night, Ethan's snores a dull backdrop, my mind raced. Our marriage, once a hopeful union, now felt like a trap tightening around me with each passing day. The man beside me, once my partner, now seemed more like a stranger, a puppet dancing to his mother's tune. Morning came, and with it the usual routine. Ethan, always the early riser, was already at the breakfast table when I entered the kitchen. His eyes were glued to his phone, a frown creasing his forehead. "Good morning," I said, my voice neutral. He grunted in response, not looking up. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the silence between us heavy. Finally, he spoke, his eyes still on his phone. "Mom mentioned you want a trip to Miami." I nodded, bracing myself. Yes, I was planning to give it to my parents. Ethan finally looked up, his expression a mix of annoyance and entitlement. "You should have discussed it with me first. Mom really wants to go." I clenched my fist, fighting the urge to lash out. "Ethan, it's my prize. I wanted to do something nice for my parents." He shrugged, dismissive. "Well, Mom's been feeling down lately, since Dad passed. This trip could really cheer her up." I could feel the anger bubbling inside me. "And what about my parents? Don't they deserve a break?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You're being selfish, Alara. Family comes first." "Your family, you mean," I shot back, my patience wearing thin. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're my wife, Alara. That makes my family your family." The finality in his voice was a clear message. In his eyes, I was an accessory, an addition to his life, not a partner. I was to fall in line, to play the part he and Vera had scripted for me. The rest of the day passed in a blur. At work, I found myself distracted, the image of Ethan's indifferent face haunting me. I felt trapped, caught in a web woven by Vera and tightened by Ethan. That evening, I returned home to find Vera in my kitchen, cooking. The smell of her stew filled the air, a stark reminder of her constant presence in our lives. "Alara, there you are. I thought I'd make dinner tonight. You must be tired from work," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. I forced a smile, my stomach churning. "That's very thoughtful of you, Vera," she hummed, stirring the pot. "Ethan told me about the Miami trip. It's a shame you won't be joining us." The casualness of her words was like a slap in the face. "I haven't decided yet, Vera." She turned, her eyes cold. "Oh, but you have, dear. Ethan and I will be going. It's settled." The room felt small, suffocating. I wanted to scream, to shout, to reclaim my life from this woman who had insidiously crept into every corner. But I held my tongue, my resolve hardening. Vera and Ethan might think they had won this round, but I was far from defeated. I would find a way to turn the tables, to expose their selfishness and manipulation. As I sat at the dinner table that night, picking at the stew Vera had made, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about a trip to Miami anymore. It was about taking back control, about fighting for my dignity, and I was ready for the battle. The following week was a tumultuous mix of silent dinners and whispered phone calls. Ethan had become increasingly distant, his allegiance clearly with Vera. The trip to Miami, my hard-won prize, now felt like a poisoned chalice. On a particularly dreary Thursday, I received a call from my mother. Her voice, usually so full of life, was tinged with disappointment. "Alara, dear, your father and I heard about the Miami trip. It's a shame we won't be going." Guilt gnawed at me. "I'm sorry, Mom. I really wanted you both to have it." She sighed. "It's all right, darling. We understand. Family must come first, as your husband says." The way she said family stung, a reminder of how Ethan and Vera had twisted the meaning of the word. That evening, as I entered the house, I found Ethan and Vera in the living room, poring over travel brochures. Their excitement was palpable, a stark contrast to the hollow feeling in my chest. "Alara, come look. We're planning our Miami trip," Ethan called out, his voice too cheerful. I approached reluctantly, the sight of them together like this sending a wave of nausea through me. Vera looked up, her eyes gleaming. "We're thinking of staying at this lovely beachfront hotel. Isn't it wonderful?" I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "It looks nice." Ethan glanced at me, then back at the brochure. "We should book soon. Don't want to miss out." Vera nodded in agreement, her smile widening. "Yes, let's." Alara, would you mind fetching us some tea? The request, so casual yet so commanding, was the last straw. Actually, I need to talk to you both about the trip. Their attention snapped to me, a flicker of wariness crossing Ethan's face. The thing is, I began, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest, the trip to Miami was supposed to be a gift for my parents. I won it, and I should decide how it's used. Ethan's expression hardened. Alara, we've been through this. Mom needs this trip. Vera chimed in, her tone patronizing. Dear, it's just a trip. Your parents will understand. Frustration boiled inside me. No, you don't understand. This was something special for my parents. You can't just take it away. Ethan stood up, his demeanor shifting from cheerful to menacing. You're being selfish and unreasonable, Alara. This is family we're talking about. I am talking about my family. I shot back, my voice rising. Vera tutted, shaking her head. Ethan, see what I mean? She's not family-oriented, not like us. I looked between them, my heart racing. You know what? Take the trip, but this is not over. Turning on my heel, I stormed out of the room, their triumphant smirks burning in my memory. As I headed to our bedroom, a plan began to form in my mind. They wanted to play dirty? Well, two could play at that game. This trip to Miami would be a trip they'd never forget. A trip where karma would come calling, and I would be the one to deliver it. I spent the next few days in a state of cold fury, my mind racing with plans for revenge. Ethan and Vera, ensconced in their bubble of self-righteousness, seemed oblivious to the storm brewing. On Saturday morning, as I sipped my coffee, Ethan slid a brochure across the kitchen table. We've booked the hotel in Miami. It's going to be fantastic. I looked at the glossy pictures of sun-kissed beaches and luxury suites, a bitter taste in my mouth. I'm sure you'll enjoy it, I said flatly. Ethan frowned, picking up on my tone. What's your problem, Alara? You should be happy for us. I stared at him, incredulous. Happy? You're taking a trip meant for my parents, and you want me to be happy? He leaned back, his expression one of exasperation. You're making a big deal out of nothing. It's just a trip. Just a trip? I echoed, my voice rising. It was a gesture for my parents, Ethan, something special for them. And you and your mother just bulldozed over it. Ethan's patience snapped. Enough, Alara. You're acting like a child. You need to start thinking about what's best for this family. The word family echoed in my ears, twisted and corrupted by his and Vera's selfishness. And what about what's best for me? For my family? I countered. Ethan stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're my wife, Alara. Your place is here with me and my mother. If you can't accept that, maybe we shouldn't be married. His words hung in the air, a threat and a challenge all at once. For a moment I felt a pang of fear, of uncertainty, but then a wave of clarity washed over me. Maybe you're right, Ethan, I said quietly, my decision made. Maybe we shouldn't. His eyes widened, taken aback by my response. What are you saying? I met his gaze, my resolve steeling. I'm saying that this marriage, this life, it's not what I want, not with you and Vera controlling every aspect of it. Ethan's face contorted with anger. You'll regret this, Alara. You think you can just walk away? From me? From this family? I stood, facing him squarely. I'm not walking away, Ethan. I'm taking back my life. He snorted, dismissive. We'll see how long you last without us. I turned away, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. The stage was set, the players in place. It was time for my revenge to unfold. As I packed a small bag, my thoughts were clear and focused. Ethan and Vera had pushed me to the edge, and now they would see just how far I was willing to go. This was no longer just about a trip to Miami. This was about reclaiming my dignity, my independence, and showing them that I was not to be underestimated. I left the house without a backward glance, the door closing behind me with a finality that felt like freedom. I moved back to my parents' house, each step feeling like a weight lifting off my shoulders. My parents, though surprised, supported my decision. In the sanctuary of my old room, I plotted my next move. A few days later, Ethan called. Alara, where are you? We need to talk about the Miami trip. I'm at my parents', I replied, my voice steady. And there's nothing to talk about. You've made your decision. He was silent for a moment. You can't just run away from this. We're married. Not for much longer, I said quietly. I'm filing for divorce, Ethan. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Divorce? You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, I affirmed. Our marriage is over, Ethan. He sputtered in disbelief. You'll regret this. You think you can just leave me and get away with it? I smiled, a sense of empowerment surging through me. I'm not getting away with anything. I'm taking back my life. Ethan's voice turned cold. We'll see about that. And the Miami trip? You're ruining everything. I chuckled softly. Oh, Ethan, you have no idea. Enjoy your trip. The line went dead, and I sat back, a plan forming in my mind. Ethan and Vera thought they had won, but the game had just begun. The next day, I called the airline. I need to make a change to the reservation for the Miami trip. The agent was accommodating. Of course, Miss Alara, what changes would you like to make? I won't be going, I said. The tickets are non-transferable, correct? That's right, the agent confirmed. Good, I said, a smile playing on my lips. Keep it that way. The day of their departure arrived, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anticipation. Ethan and Vera, unaware of the surprise awaiting them at the airport, were in for a rude awakening. I received a call from Ethan later that day, his voice frantic. Alara, what the hell did you do? They won't let us board. The tickets are void without you. I feigned innocence. Really? That's strange. I guess you should have read the fine print, Ethan. You did this on purpose, he accused. I shrugged, even though he couldn't see me. You took something that wasn't yours, Ethan. Actions have consequences. His voice was a mix of anger and desperation. This isn't over, Alara. You'll pay for this. I hung up, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. This was just the beginning of their downfall. Ethan and Vera had underestimated me, but they were about to learn just how costly that mistake was. As I sat back, a plan unfolding in my mind, I knew one thing for sure. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and I had just started cooking. After thwarting Ethan and Vera's Miami plans, I felt a sense of control returning to my life. But my thirst for justice was far from quenched. The real act of retribution was about to begin. A week passed, and I received a call from Ethan. His tone was a mix of anger and desperation. Alara, we need to talk. I'm coming over. I agreed, curiosity piqued. When he arrived, he was a shadow of his usual arrogant self. Alara, I'm in trouble, he began, his eyes avoiding mine. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of trouble? He hesitated before confessing. At work. They've started an investigation. They think I've been embezzling funds. I suppressed a smile. Embezzling? That's serious, Ethan. He ran a hand through his hair, visibly stressed. It's not just that. They're questioning my absences, my trips with Mom. They think it's all connected. I leaned back, the pieces falling into place. Sounds like you've made quite a mess. He looked up, desperation in his eyes. Alara, I need your help. You have to vouch for me. Tell them I was with you. I laughed, the sound bitter. Why would I do that, Ethan, after everything? He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Please, Alara, I'm begging you. If I lose this job, I'm ruined. I stared at him, the man who had once been my world, now reduced to a groveling mess. You should have thought about that before, Ethan. You made your bed. Now lie in it. As he left, his shoulders slumped. I knew the wheels of karma were turning. The following day, news of Ethan's dismissal and his embezzlement spread. Vera, once so proud and haughty, became the subject of whispers and judgmental glances in the neighborhood. Their fall from grace was swift and merciless. Ethan tried to reach out again, but I was done. My lawyer handled the divorce proceedings, ensuring I was well protected and compensated. As for Ethan, he was left to face the consequences of his actions alone. I visited my parents, sharing the news. It's over, I told them. The divorce is final. My mother hugged me, tears in her eyes. You're strong, Alara. Stronger than you know. I nodded, a sense of peace settling over me. I had to be, Mom, for myself. In the end, Ethan and Vera reaped what they had sown. Their deceit and selfishness had been their undoing. As for me, I was free from their toxic grip, ready to start anew. The scars of the past would always be there, but they were a reminder of the battles I had faced and won. I was no longer the meek, compliant wife. I was Alara, a woman who had stood up for herself and emerged stronger. The day after my divorce was finalized marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. The shackles of my oppressive marriage were finally broken, and I could breathe again. Sitting in my parents' garden, I reflected on the journey that had led me here. The pain, the betrayal, and ultimately, the triumph over those who sought to control me. My mother joined me with 2 cups of tea. What will you do now, Alara? She asked gently. I took a sip, feeling the warmth spread through me. I'm going to live, Mom, for myself this time. She smiled, a look of pride in her eyes. You've grown so much, darling. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. My father answered it, his voice rising in surprise. Ethan, what are you doing here? I stood, my heart pounding. Ethan stood at the door, a shadow of his former self. Alara, I need to talk to you. I walked over, my resolve firm. There's nothing left to say, Ethan. He looked desperate, his eyes pleading. Please, Alara, I've lost everything. My job, my reputation. Even Mom won't talk to me. I need your help. I shook my head, incredulous. You expect me to help you? After everything you've done? He reached out, but I stepped back. I'm sorry, Alara, I was wrong. Please, give me another chance. Then I looked at him, seeing the man I once loved now broken and humbled. It's too late, Ethan. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. He slumped, defeated. I understand. I'm sorry, Alara. Truly. As he walked away, I felt a sense of closure. Ethan's downfall was his own doing. He had underestimated me and paid the price. Turning back to my parents, I smiled. I think it's time for a new adventure. Weeks later, I found myself on a plane to Miami, the trip I had won all those months ago. This time it was on my terms. My parents sat beside me, their excitement contagious. As the plane soared above the clouds, I looked out the window, a sense of freedom washing over me. I had faced my battles and emerged victorious. Now it was time to enjoy the peace that came after the storm. Miami awaited, a symbol of my newfound independence and strength. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, to live a life filled with joy on my terms. Ethan and Vera were part of my past, a chapter closed and left behind. Ahead lay endless possibilities, a future where I was the author of my own story, and I was determined to make it a beautiful one.